It is the most wonderful week of the year because the Thanksgiving slate is just 2 days away, almost from right now. Kickoff is set for 12:30 p.m. Eastern for that opening game. We're going to break down all three of the Thanksgiving games, get you set for them from a DFS perspective, and hopefully get you some money to pay off the hefty grocery bills for this week. This is the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast powered by numberFire. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com. Joined here, as always, by Brandon Gdula. He is the senior managing editor of numberFire.com. Brandon, happy Thanksgiving-ish to you. How you doing today?
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving to use. It's a busy day for sure. We're in the middle of I guess I'll just stick with the Amansky. We're right in the middle. We had a pod yesterday recapping stuff. I have a pod tomorrow looking ahead to the main slate. Other sports don't stop. We got basketball, World Cup, so it's basically never ending. But it's really hard to be negative whenever we get an extra 3-game slate. We have other 3-game slates, but none of them are quite like the Thanksgiving slate.
They're really not, because they're so spread out. You get to kind of digest things literally and figuratively as the day goes along. I think this year it's a tough slate in a good way, where you got to make some tough decisions. You got to kind of dig deep on some guys, try to identify. I have a scrubs to consider list, which is, I don't know, it seems not fun, but we're going to break down guys we like in each game, get you a read on the overall slate on FanDuel, hopefully give you an overall overview of this slate in just one second. But first, as Brandon mentioned, back-to-back podcasts here on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. Week 11 recap went up yesterday, and tomorrow we'll have our week the 12 main slate breakdown for the Sunday slate. That'll be up tomorrow, and also live on the FanDuel YouTube page at noon Eastern. So if you're watching there and you want to watch again tomorrow, that's at noon Eastern for the main slate breakdown, and up on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed after that. So go search for the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, leave us a rating and review as well. Football fans, make this a Thanksgiving to remember with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because when you bet an NFL same-game parlay from now through November 28th, which is a week from today, yesterday, all customers can get up to $1,000 in free bets, win or lose. Just bet an NFL same-game parlay or same-game parlay plus of at least $20. The bigger your bet, the more you'll get back in free bets. NFL same-game parlays are the perfect way to combine your bets for a chance at a larger payday. Build your own or choose from one of the popular SGPs pre-built for you in the FanDuel top-rated sportsbook app. However you want to play, get up to $1,000 in free bets, win or lose, when you bet an NFL same-game parlay of 4 legs or more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Must be 21 plus in select states. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable free bets that expire in 7 days after receipt. Max free bet $100. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG. In Arizona, 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT-STEP to 53342. In Connecticut, 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat. In Indiana, 1-800-9-WITH-IT. In Kansas, 1-800-522-4700 or ksgamblinghelp.com. But that is also 1-800-522-4700 for Wyoming as well. In Louisiana, 1-877-770-STOP. In New York, 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. In Tennessee, call the red line at 1-800-889-9789, or in West Virginia, 1-800-GAMBLER.net. Now, we'll go game by game here in a second, but first, let's go through overall small slate strategy, because this is a 3-game slate. Typically, we're breaking down a full slate of 10, 11, 12, etc. games. This is very different. So, Brandon, for you, when you are looking at a shorter slate, how does your mindset shift for that versus when you're building out a full slate lineup?
So for a full slate lineup, we talk all the time about having mistake erasers, and making sure that every single player in our lineups can help us overcome whenever we do inevitably get players wrong. That's not really possible on a smaller slate. And while I think in the past, especially for even on these smaller slates, I've tried to make sure that I really limited my punt plays. Guys who can't help me make up mistakes. It has to depend on the entire slate because there are a few guys who can be the mistake by not playing. Specifically, Josh Allen comes to mind as, you might like your lineup if you go down to all your lineups if you go down to Dak Prescott and all of them, and you don't get up to Josh Allen. Therefore, you're not playing any guys who may or may not, run 30% of the routes or something. But if Allen does take advantage of a matchup against one of the worst defenses in the NFL, there's no coming back from that. There's just not enough points unless someone, one of the other 5 quarterbacks kind of goes berserk. So basically, I'm trying to think of it as in not like making sure I have access to the guys with ceilings and not so much like avoiding the scrubs a little bit.
Yeah, you said the key thing there at the beginning. We think all the time about mistake erasers because we want the guys who have ceilings and stuff like that. And I do still want mistake erasers. I want guys who can do the Josh Allen and, go for 35 points. I want those guys on my team. But I think that what you were saying was we have to make some consolations to get there. And on a full slate, you're typically not making too many consolations. Like you can justify having a path to upside for all the players in your lineup. That might not be the case here. Now I built out on Monday, a lineup where I went the lowest I could go at every single position, the lowest I could justify. Like if this were a full slate, the lowest I could justify at every position. That lineup could not get to Josh Allen at quarterback, which means that if I want to use Josh Allen, I have to bend the rules, and that's okay. Like that's fine. That is something that is fully justifiable. I could get there if I went receiver in the flex or tight end in the flex, but I couldn't get there with running back in the flex. So being more open to not flexing what I think is the strongest position on this slate, which is running back, to be receptive to that, I have to be receptive to guys who don't have the most obvious ceiling or don't have just because like you're not going to need 18 points out of all 3 wide receivers to feast on this slate. So I have to open the player pool to guys I wouldn't typically consider just because I need access to the guys who can be mistake erasers. And I can't get there for all those guys just by limiting myself to guys who have what we consider to be a typically viable role.
Yeah, part of why I trailed off at the end is because I didn't want to say what you said before the show started, which is basically redefining what a ceiling is for this slate.
Right.
So I couldn't get that out of my head, and I didn't want to say the thing that you said, but I think that was a very apt way to put it. Is it only takes one is a bad thought process for a main slate. It only takes one is probably fine. For these guys on a 3-game slate.
And I will say, like, I made that lineup that I was talking about where it was the lowest I could go at each spot. There is a list of guys I can use who didn't make that lineup who were lower salaried. And like, I'm fine with these guys. Do I feel great about them? No. But like, it's a list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 guys I can turn to and feel okay about it. And if I've got 7 guys, limit my exposure to all of them. I don't want to be super exposed to any of them personally, but just kind of, keeping in mind, that they're options if I want to get access to Josh Allen, Saquon Barkley, Stephon Diggs, all those guys. If I want to get there, I have to take some consolations, and I will be doing that here. We did get a question over on YouTube from Theo. Theo is asking, if you're all in on a player, does that mean you're over 50% exposure? So this is a different discussion for a short slate than it is for a full slate. Because, I mean, the answer is yes for both. Because, like, we've had times where we've had almost 100% of certain guys, like Tony Pollard without Zeke that 1 week. We'll go above 50% pretty often for running back specifically, at least for me. So yeah, especially in a 3-game slate though, you're going to have to be comfortable with higher exposure to. Were you going to say something?
Oh, sorry. You lagged on my end.
Sorry. I thought you wanted to say something else.
Well, it depends on it all comes down to risk tolerance.
Yeah.
And it depends on how many lineups you're playing. if you're playing like 5 lineups, I think that if you're going away from 100% on guys, you're doing yourself a bit of a disservice because you're just minimizing the opportunities that you're going to hit the right combo.
Give yourself 5 darts if you assume that you get Ramondre Stevenson correct or Dalvin Cook. Give yourself 5 darts as opposed to 3 or 4.
Yeah. So I used to play more lineups. Now I play fewer lineups. I will play 100% of guys, especially on this slate. But thinking ahead to like the main slate, for example, I think I'm probably going to play 100% Antonio Gibson because I think his salary is too low across. Let's just ballpark like 10 to 20 lineups. I think that even then you still want to maximize the chance, or at least I do. I want to maximize the chance that if that person has a huge game that I benefit, because it can very easily feel like you're chasing something if you have sprinkles of everyone. Right. And then you're like, I like this guy more, but I just kind of wanted to diversify. But
it also just makes it less likely you'll get the right combination.
Yeah.
And like that's what's most important to me. So when you're going 100% lock button on a person or close to that, that's not where you want to go like the dusty dudes to consider. That's not the list you want to be on. You want to be on, okay, I assume I've got this guy who I think is super undersalaried. I love Devin Singletary at his salary, so I will lock him in because he has a path to a good median expectation, but also a good ceiling. He fits both those check boxes. Those are the kind of guys you want to build around and then use the rotational, like the others to consider as being the more rotational pieces to help you pinpoint the one who happens to be right there.
Yeah, I think you could also apply that to like Josh Allen this week or Saquon Barkley. Like
I'm not doing that for Allen or Barkley, but you can.
I'm just saying, on a slate like this, you look at the quarterbacks and you're like, Dak's going to be okay, but there's no way Kirk Cousins, Jared Goff, Daniel Jones, or Mac Jones like put up huge games. And there's no way that I foresee Josh Allen not scoring 35 on the Lions.
You're not saying that. You're saying that hypothetically.
I'm saying hypothetically.
Yeah, cool.
Because look, we're going to say what we think about the slate in these matchups, and I have range of outcome numbers, but whenever you take a stand, so in that example, like you're saying, I'm just going to play Josh Allen. My lineups are going to be a little bit difficult to fill out the rest of the way. But then, you have 100% Josh Allen. He does go off. You lock that in terms of the probability. Then you're like, the value plays you're sort of rotating in. All you kind of need to do is have one or two of those guys who hits. And so you're basically just okay. Anyone who wants to think about it, pull up like some sort of coin flip analyzer or something like that and be like, lock in the probability that, one player or like one coin flip is the result you're thinking of, and check out how that changes the probability of the next coin flips. This is not all just coin flips, but like probability changes so much whenever you have a few constants rather than all the unknowns.
Right, exactly. And I think that's kind of the overall thought process here, but we'll go through like player level analysis, but the overall like thought process of shifting your mentality is important for this kind of slate, roster building, exposure, stuff like that. That's important, but let's now go game by game and break down the Thanksgiving game. Starting off with the Bills at the Lions. Right now, the spread in that game is 9.5 points. The Bills are favored. Not surprisingly there. Total is 53.5. Injuries to note here. Jeff Okudah missed practice for the Lions on Monday. He is in concussion protocol. He left early on Sunday. I'm not sure if he has time to get out of protocol, if he actually suffered a concussion. So probably assuming Okudah is out, that's a pretty big loss for the Lions secondary there. DJ Chark limited in practice with his ankle injury. Josh Reynolds did not practice due to a back injury. Those are the key ones for the Bills and the Lions. Brandon, when you look at this game from the top down, what stands out to you from a DFS perspective?
I think the thing you can't really get around is Josh Allen and how you're viewing him relative to the rest of the quarterbacks. So I run range of outcome simulations, and my data has it about 55% likely that Josh Allen is the QB1, the highest scoring quarterback on the slate. Bump that down, even just say 50-50. So it's basically Allen versus the field. Of course, the thing we have to talk about with Allen is the salary. If you count for salary and look at it from a value standpoint, he's still about 30% likely to be the best value at quarterback. You then have to apply what that does to the rest of your lineup because you're allocating so much salary to Josh Allen. But for example, you want to pivot to Jared Goff in this game. He's under 5% likely to lead the slate in FanDuel points among quarterbacks. So that's I really think that there's no way we can't talk about Allen first, really dig in and figure out where we want our exposures to be. I know I threw out the hypothetical. I'm not going to go 100% Josh Allen this week. I'm definitely, though, not completely fading Josh Allen because I'm a bit of a coward in that regard, and I don't want to be rooting against Josh Allen, who's basically, him versus the field to be the best QB on the slate.
Yeah, so I mentioned again the lineup that I built, lowest consideration guy at each position. That one couldn't get to Josh Allen. So if I'm using Josh Allen, I have to make consolation somewhere. And that's not a super comfortable feeling. I think that to me, if I have one lineup, Allen will most likely not be in there because I want to give myself higher probability swipes at other positions. If I can build a lineup where I'm not changing my ceiling aspirations without using Josh Allen, then I'm okay doing that. I think that Dak is fully justifiable. Daniel Jones, because he runs as much as he does, has a path to a ceiling as well. Not going to talk about the rest. I considered talking about the other side of this game, decided against it in real time. I did bet the Lions money line though, so I'm the true fool here. Yeah, I know. I think that if I have one lineup, Josh Allen is unlikely to be in it. Now, with that said, I think that Thanksgiving 3-game slates in general are great spots to play single entry. And let's say I decide to play 3 different single entry lineups. I might have 2 Josh Allen ones there. If I have one, though, it's probably not going to be Allen. So I think if you give me 10 lineups, probably going half Josh Allen or so, somewhere around there, just because of I like your simulations, not to flatter you, but I want to lean on the math and allow that to give me like a guiding light to show where my Josh Allen exposure should be. So it should probably be, I think, somewhere between 30 to 50% is most likely where I'll wind up. That's probably going to be even with the field. And I'm okay with that personally, because I think that I can get a better read on the rest of the slate, and that's okay. Yeah. I can differentiate elsewhere. So I'm okay being even with the field on Josh Allen. If I have one lineup, probably not, but I'll probably be 30 to 50% overall on Josh Allen.
Yeah, so basically think of every lineup you're not playing Josh Allen is basically a bet against Allen going completely bananas and putting up like 35 or more.
It is also, though, a bet on the small segment of the pie where Dak Prescott puts up 35 and matches him. That's not a huge chunk of the probability, but it is in there.
Yes, but I'm talking like that's specifically if you're playing Dak. Like I'm kind of more talking about if you're going to the other guys, the other 4, because unsurprisingly, we like Allen, in a vacuum, number 1, Dak number 2 at salary. I think we're both leaning Dak just because it really helps out.
Yeah.
But if you're not, what I'm getting at is if you're playing like Jared Goff or Kirk Cousins, like they're not going to score more than 25 points. It's just not what they do. So unless you think that,
no,
okay.
Not Cousins. Cousins is. We'll talk about that later, but I'm not there.
Yeah, so that's why like you can't really talk about Josh Allen. Just talk about the matchup and just be like, oh well, let's play. It's like, what does that do to the rest of the lineup? So I think I'm going to be about 40 to 50% Allen. Spoiler alert: I'll probably be about 40 to 50% Dak, and if I have anything left over, probably just going to go Daniel Jones. But that's Allen is I think the most crucial talking point of the week.
And the one thing I think that is pushing me potentially closer to the 30 end of the range of outcomes than 50% is the fact that Bills have been more rush heavy recently. We talked about this in the Monday recap, but in the 2 games since Josh Allen's elbow injury, their early on first half pass rate was 58% in week 10 or 48% in week 10, 52% week 11. It was 67% before the Allen elbow injury. So they've been more run heavy recently than they were in the past, which does influence my view of Devin Singletary, but also does decrease at least a tiny bit the odds that Josh Allen goes completely bananas. Also, very weird travel schedule. They flew to Detroit on Saturday, flew back on Sunday, then now fly back to Detroit again on Wednesday, and it's an early game. This is the earliest game on the slate. That's a really tough schedule, and I think that's part of why I bet the Lions, but also like that's a difficult thing to overcome and kind of increases the variance in their potential performance. So the path to a disappointment is now larger. I think it's not huge, but it's larger than it was before. So if I had to guess, if I had to set like an over under for exposure for Josh Allen, for me, 38.5, probably somewhere around there. Because I think that by the time I'm building lineups on Wednesday night, Thursday morning, I'll be skewing a bit more towards Dak because of salary, because of other stuff impacting Allen's range of outcomes.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's one of those spots where Allen, we know, is going to be a good process-based play, especially against this defense. That's not going to surprise anybody. But it really comes down to thinking through, like, building 5 lineups, 10 lineups. What are you doing with Allen? And that's why I love this slate. It's not just talk about the matchups, because we all know what the matchups are by week 12. It's just like, how likely is Allen to completely erupt by comparison. So I think we're both about, in the same range. Let's just call it 40-ish% and simplify it.
38.5. I'm sticking with it. Let's talk about the like, I would say the guy on this slate I might like the most at any position, which is weird for me. That's Devin Singletary. The single digits nickname is now temporarily on pause. It might come back, but Singletary, with the increased reliance on the rush of the Bills, that's a good thing for him. 18 carries this past week, 13 the week before that. Still getting some work in the passing game, not a huge contributor there, but also a lot of red zone work last week. 9 red zone chances for Singletary, the most he's had this year by 3. His first time above a 36% red zone share. So good involvement there. $6,900. Could be a situation where they just kind of want to get out of town with a win, and that could lead to more Singletary as well. Singletary comes in $6,900. He is the cover boy for the YouTube version of this show for today. So I've come full circle on Devin Singletary. We are back to being a pro Devin Singletary podcast for the time being. I think that if I had to bet my highest exposure player by the end of the lineup building process, probably going to be Singletary. What's your read on him?
What do you think, like 67% for Singletary for you?
I'm going to put the over-under at 83.5.
Okay. Since week 6, when we saw his role kind of change a bit, 76% snap rate, 60% route rate, 20.4 adjusted opportunities per game, which is carries plus double your targets. Good red zone share, as you talked about. But one thing that I noted in that split is that he's getting an opportunity on 35% of his snaps, whereas before that split, so weeks 1 through 5, 29%. Still not an amazing number, but Singletary plays snaps, and part of the reason why I was trying to be on him early in the season is because he's playing snaps. He just wasn't getting as much work. We're now seeing the snap rate not necessarily change too much, but him, that he's getting the ball more, and it makes sense because Allen's not 100%. They can run the ball a little bit. They should be able to run the ball plenty, in this matchup. If you go through his game log and look at, his outputs, he had the 19.6 point game back against Miami. But the past 2, even when things are have been basically the best, 15.2 and 16.7 FanDuel points with 3 touchdowns in that span. Usually we'd look at that on a main slate and be like, he can't really hurt me by putting up 15 in this spot, even at 6,900. If he puts up 15 at 6,900, he has a good shot of making the optimal lineup this week. So that's a perfect example, I think, of reconsidering the way that we're looking at the slate. There are just only so many guys who can really, really put up massive outcomes. So we don't need it as much from Singletary. So I think he's going to be one of he might be the guy that I have the most of. Yeah. But there is someone else in the late game who might rival it.
Okay, I think I know what you're talking about, and I think I agree with what you're saying there as well. Let's talk about the wide receivers on the Bills side of things. Stephon Diggs, $9,300. That's high. Gabe Davis comes in at 72. Then you have Isaiah McKenzie, whose snap rate's been pretty disappointing, I would say. His salary is 52. Khalil Shakir not getting enough snaps for me to be super enthused there. So, and then Dawson Knox at tight end comes in at $5,500. Looking at the games they played with Dawson Knox and Gabe Davis healthy, Stephon Diggs, 28% target share. Gabe is 17%. Knox is at 12%. Diggs, 42% of the deep targets, 24% in the red zone. Gabe, 31% deep, 15% in the red zone. Knox has a 15% red zone share as well across those games. Now, Knox's role's been getting a little bit better recently. couple more targets. He's $5,500. I prefer Dalton Schultz over him by a pretty significant margin. Knox is in play. My question for you is, can you get to Allen and Diggs without filling out a lineup you hate?
I'll try it quickly, but probably not.
So I have right now Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs. I had the Vikings defense at 4,000 in there, and then Devin Singletary at 69. I have 60-60 left for a running back, 2 receivers, a tight end, and a flex. I'm going to have to punt in multiple positions there. So that does mean that Allen Diggs lineups will be they'll be tougher to get to, which is a good thing if you want lower roster rates, but also that lineup's going to be thin. What's your read on that combination specifically?
Yeah, that's a difficult one. That should lead to a pretty unique lineup, because if you plug in, I have the Giants defense in here, but if you add Ramondre Stevenson, who's the guy I think contends with Singletary, is one of the best plays at salary on the slate at 72. So you're basically taking the 2 sort of lowest salaried featured backs on the slate with Allen and Diggs. You still need 2 receivers, a tight end, and a flex for 5,900 on average. It's doable. It's going to be tight, and you're going to need, again, that's the kind of lineup you build based on and I'm surprised you haven't said this yet, but telling yourself a narrative of how games will play out.
Yeah.
You say Allen and Diggs are they're going to go in, they're going to, wreck stuff and leave. And that, you can tell yourself Giants Cowboys divisional game could be ugly. Dallas is no stranger to sometimes making games a bit harder than they need to be. And then there's a lot of reasons you could dislike the night game. And so you say, okay, there's not going to be big games from other matchups, so I don't really need to build around other players, but that's going to be very difficult to get to. So I probably won't have very many, if any, of those stacks. I will say that we've seen last week Davis, Knox, and Diggs all run at least 86% of their routes. Only Singletary at 55% was above 50%. So it's been those 3 guys. McKenzie 48%. So I don't really think this is a one where we can get too deep. I think you could maybe roll the dice on McKenzie, but probably not going to risk it with anyone outside of those Bills that I just mentioned.
Yeah, I didn't have any of them on my scrubs to consider list. They were not in there. I think I agree with you where I'll probably wind up being lower on the Diggs Allen combination than most, and just kind of hoping that Diggs doesn't do enough to bury me for not using him. He could. Like, I know that going in. He has the ability to torch me, but I have to be okay with that. What are the odds he hangs 30 on me and makes it impossible for me to make up that ground? Not negligible. Definitely, like, there is a path to 30 for him there, but I kind of would rather bet against that than bet on it when it does require me so wild elsewhere within my lineup. Davis is a lot easier to get to, 72, which means he'll probably be more popular than Diggs. But he also is a guy who can be a mistake eraser. He can be a guy who gets that 30 points as well. It's higher odds for Diggs, but Davis can do that too. So I think I will wind up with more Davis just because of salary. He's $2,100 lower salaried. It's probably just going to be the most common route, but it's just so hard to justify punting at 2 or 3 spots. I can justify punting in 1 spot to get me to Allen. Punting in 2 or 3 spots using guys who don't have good range of outcomes, don't have a path to like 10 points even, that's a lot tougher for me to justify than doing so at 1 spot.
Yeah, I have Diggs about 32% to lead the slate in FanDuel points, but about 11% to be the best value at receiver, which is 3rd behind Gabe Davis and CeeDee Lamb, who leads. But yeah, I mean, receivers always kind of spread out if you look at actual true range of outcomes there. So yeah, there's a chance that Diggs puts up 30. I have him about 20% to put up 25. I don't have 30 points listed here.
25 is good enough, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, my question to you is, how much of a priority is Stephon Diggs in lineups where you're not playing Josh Allen?
Not huge, because they're so tied together. Like if Diggs goes for 30, Josh Allen should be your quarterback. Is kind of my mindset on that. So I think the overall takeaway is I'll just be lower on Stephon Diggs, and I probably should be, but also then the field.
Yeah, I'm probably with you there.
Okay, let's talk about the Detroit side of things here. We talked about Knox briefly. I think he's in play below Schultz, but viable at tight end. So on my scrubs to consider list, there are two guys on the Lions side. Upsettingly, DeAndre Swift counts as a scrub to consider because he is below the range I'd want to consider at running back. He's fine. He's $6,200. Like, that's a low salary. He's not playing a ton of snaps, but he's still getting targets, which means he has a path to a decent game. He had 4 red zone chances on Sunday. I don't want to be on him because I think people are too optimistic that his role will change, and I don't think it really will. But like, he's still getting high leverage touches, and that's a path to a decent game. The other one is Khalif Raymond, who you have talked up before, and I poo-pooed, but I'm open to it on a slate like this. In the games they played without TJ Hawkinson, 18% target share for Khalif Raymond, 33% of the deep targets in those games. Amon-Ra St. Brown is at 38% overall and 44% deep, so he's a very good play at his salary. But Raymond coming in, $5,300. I think of my list of guys who I typically wouldn't want to consider but might have to here, I would say Khalif Raymond's probably the one I'm most receptive to. It's either him or KJ Osborne, I think, are probably the two I'm most receptive to on that list. So Raymond, decently likely punting option when I go with Josh Allen. I'm okay with Swift. I'd like to avoid it if I can, but out of necessity, I might need to get there. And then Amon-Ra St. Brown coming in at 76. Would love to get there as often as I can. Just a question of how often I can based on value. What's your read on the Lions side here?
Basically the same. And then we got to talk about Jamal Williams just briefly.
You can.
I think people want to know our thoughts on Jamal Williams, but
I don't think they do. They might think they do. I don't think they do.
So Swift, since he came back in week 8, just about a 32% snap share, but one of those sort of a little bit misleading snap rates where he's getting decent opportunities on a per snap basis, about 43% for him. So when he's out there for a purpose. He did have a good red zone role last week, as you talked about. I think that 30 yards and a touchdown could be enough at his salary to get us through. I think that he's a more viable play than the overall data looks like. Perfect example of someone we would not touch on a main slate, but is very much in play on this slate. I think Amon-Ra St. Brown is such a standout. 38% target share in 3 games since the Hawkinson trade. Almost 50% of the air yards, 38% weighted target share if I account for downfield and red zone targets as well. Eventually he's got to score. I think that he can score this week, especially after getting so close so many times last week. I want to make sure that I'm overweight on St. Brown. I feel like he's the kind of guy who can put up 24 even in this matchup, and just feel like I needed to have him early on in the day.
Well, that's part of the appeal for me with dropping down from Allen to Dak or someone else, is that it makes it a lot easier to Amon-Ra St. Brown. And I think the gap between Amon-Ra St. Brown and the 6,000 range of wide receiver, I like Darius Slayton. I think he's totally fine. I'm okay with Michael Gallup. I'm okay with Jacoby Myers, and I'm okay with Gabe Davis, but the gap between Amon-Ra St. Brown and them is huge. So I want to get there and increase my exposure to him via not being as high on Josh Allen, which doesn't feel good, but I think that's a worthwhile trade-off here.
Yeah, I think so. We know Diggs and Justin Jefferson have slate altering upside. CeeDee Lamb and Amon-Ra St. Brown also have that. Mm-hmm. They're just less likely to get there. Mm-hmm. They're salaried as such. Mm-hmm. But this is, I think, one of those situations where Diggs and Jefferson have been good, so their salaries are about at their peak. Lamb's been, good. St. Brown hasn't scored in ages, so his salary is toward the low end. But and then I'd throw Gabe Davis in there, someone who can obviously break the slate.
Yeah,
but those 5 pretty much unmatched in terms of that, and we're getting, I would say, discounts on Lamb, but especially St. Brown in that regard. So I might be most overweight. So basically my percentage versus, the public on St. Brown, because I just want to be there whenever he has a big game, because it's definitely within that range of outcomes for him.
Where is Raymond for you among the punting options?
He's probably toward the top, because I don't see how they don't have to throw extra here.
Yeah.
He's at an 18% target share since the Hawkinson trade. I think that's, again, not necessarily good enough for main slate, but I'll take that in a game where there should be passing volume. The yardage upside's a bit muted, hasn't gotten over 76, but also hasn't scored yet this season. So if he gets me 9, if he goes for 76 and 3 or 4 catches at 5,500, like that can be enough.
Yeah. I think that's where I'm at as well. Is there is enough there to feel okay about it. So I'm fine with him. We'll use him. I know that for sure. Probably highest on my the value list. Tight ends for the Lions. I think you're just kind of betting on Hawkinson, Schultz, and Knox not doing anything because I can't reasonably expect a lot of Brock Wright. Played a lot of snaps, but not a ton of routes. Think about a 50% route rate in their most recent game.
46% since the Hawkinson trade, 77% snap rate though, so a lot of pass blocking there.
Yeah, and that's not
5%
really,
target share. Yeah, you don't.
Yeah, I don't feel great about the other guys either. So
He's
to
definitely
me,
scoring.
he could score and still not be great though, relative to like salary.
Sure.
So especially when like Schultz and Hawkinson are actually like legit viable tight ends on main slates. Any golf for you or no?
No.
Probably not for me either.
It obviously depends on how many lineups I'm playing, but let's just simplify it. Say like 20. I don't think I get to Jared Goff.
Okay. Any final thoughts for you on this game?
Any Jamal Williams for you?
Oh shoot, I forgot to talk about him. Yes, because he actually has a role. I talked about how I bet the Lions money line. I clearly think there is a non-zero chance they win this game, and that would lead to he's probably going to contribute if they do win. So if I assume the Lions win, which my model has happening, decent amount of time relative to the odds of plus 360, he'll probably be involved. In the games he's played with Swift back, 70 yards and scrimmage per game. That's just a little bit below Devin Singletary at 77 per game from week 3 on when that's what I have as his most relevant sample for him. And very good red zone role for Jamal Williams, but no passing game involvement. That hurts his path to a ceiling. There's just not a lot of yardage upside there. So limited. And if I wind up lower on him, I'm going to be very okay. I would prefer to be lower on him than the field. I think it's my overall takeaway.
I think he's dependent on game stacks.
He's dependent on me assuming the Lions win. I think more so than even game stacks.
That's
and
fine.
The odds of that are even if I did take their money line, it's not super high. It's just higher than plus 360. So, that's where I'm at there. Any final thoughts for you in this game?
I think that's it.
Okay. Let's move now to the second game. That is the Giants at the Cowboys. Right now, Cowboys 9.5-point favorites. The total is 44.5. Couple injury notes here. Wan'Dale Robinson done for the year with a torn ACL. That is a bummer. Richie James also missed practice Monday with a knee injury for the Giants. Micah Parsons is expected to play, but did sit out practice on Monday due to a knee injury. He injured it on Sunday, but returned the next series, even though that game was done by that point. Anthony Barr didn't practice because of a hamstring injury. That's held him out the past 2 games. Now, they did move Parsons back to being a pass rusher despite Barr not playing last week, which was a deviation from what they did the previous week. So Barr might not be as big of a factor as I thought he was going into that Vikings game, but still, someone to monitor for sure on the Cowboy side of things. Overall view for you of Giants at Cowboys?
Probably my favorite game to stack. It's obviously between this one and the one we just talked about, but I feel like it's a little bit more stackable because of Dak Prescott's salary. It's also, I would say, a 2-quarterback game where we consider both of these guys, and probably the only 3 quarterbacks that I'll consider realistically with Dak, Jones, and Josh Allen. So I think it's my favorite one to stack up. We have a few different pass catchers we can go to with Dak. Obviously, CeeDee Lamb, Dalton Schultz, the preferences, but Michael Gallup, Noah Brown, probably one of the guys who I'm really targeting as I'm going to play enough Dak where I should probably have some Noah Brown because his role's he runs routes, and again, it only takes one. I think he's good as well. So
Yeah, it's fine.
I think I'll have a decent amount of Noah Brown. That's not to say like 30%, but
No.
like 10 to 15%. Because again, my lineups
Above or
I'm not
below
gonna.
Khalif Raymond?
I'd go Raymond over
I
Noah
would
Brown.
too, by a bit, but I think they're in the same tier.
Yeah. So I
Brown,
think it's fun.
I was like thinking about Noah Brown. I was like, okay, I am okay with Michael Gallup. If I'm okay with Gallup, realistically, I should be okay with Noah Brown too. There's not that big of a difference. Like Brown led the team in targets in Dak's first game back, missed a game due to injury, came back, didn't do a lot in his first game back, but then his most recent week earned a couple of targets. We know the game was basically out of hand right away there. But 42 yards in that game, that's fine for this slate. So I would prefer Raymond, but I think that Brown is up there for sure. Okay with him in this situation. I think that Dak will probably wind up being my highest exposure quarterback for this week for the reasons you mentioned, just because the salary is good. I think this game is fine. Pretty good matchup for the Cowboys. The Giants defense ranks 26th against the pass and early downs, 26th against the rush and early downs as well. They're a very good late down team. Like their late down success rate is great because Wink Martindale is a psycho, their defensive coordinator. So that's a positive thing, but it's not going to be enough to scare me out of going towards the Dallas offense here. So like Gallup a lot, like Dak a lot. I'm okay with Gallup. I'll probably wind up more than I should. That's an evergreen statement for me on Michael Gallup.
Yeah.
But I do want to intentionally limit stuff because he hasn't had the best year in terms of like on-field play. I think that impacts things. Let's talk about the backfield. Tony Pollard, we saw him in his first game playing alongside Zeke since they kind of figured out that Pollard was the guy. In that game, Pollard's snap rate was above 60%, I believe, each of the first three quarters. So if I'm projecting a snap rate for Pollard, I'm probably sitting around 60% or so. And I'm kind of expecting an Aaron Jones type role. Now, Aaron Jones at $8,500 against the Giants is maybe a little bit oversalaried, potentially. It's very dependent on efficiency to get by. But like ceiling game, obviously well within his range of outcomes. So I would say to me, I'm probably going to wind up being a bit under on Pollard. It's not because I expect Zeke to suddenly have this huge role, but it's because, I don't know, I just think that the salary is high. There are alternatives. He's going to come in very popular. So I think that because everyone else will be very enthusiastic there, I'm going to wind up being underweight despite not really wanting to be there. What's your read on the backfield? And you could talk about Zeke too.
Yeah, I think Pollard a bit oversalaried. It's one of those spots where it's like, okay, we can get Saquon at 88 or Tony Pollard at 85 on a main slate, no question. It's Saquon every time. 3-game slate, you're accounting more for variance, and like maybe Saquon doesn't do a whole lot.
Also a really tough spot. I know the Cowboys' rush defense is not great, but like their defense overall is very, very good, and the Giants' offense is banged up.
Yeah, so like you got to account for that. It's hard with Pollard because I think Aaron Jones is a great comp. Maybe Aaron Jones, I guess, like with Jamal Williams in the past.
Aaron Jones is a better quarterback play.
But I'm saying where I'm not as concerned about Aaron Jones in the red zone anymore. I used to be more concerned about him in the red zone. I still think that Ezekiel Elliott will be involved in the red zone. I don't care. Like, you can look at like yards per carry, but yards per carry is not a great stat for efficiency. Yeah. Zeke
played well. He played well on Sunday.
Like his rushing success rate numbers are good.
Yeah.
He gets like what he needs to do, and was involved in the red zone. What do you have?
He has a valuable role in this team, and that's fine.
So like this is it's a spot where like Zeke could score twice. Pollard could have 100 yards but not score.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to be tough at 85 because probably need a little bit more than like 100 yards from scrimmage. But I will have Pollard in stacks. I think that a Pollard and Dak stack is something that people won't do enough of.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably my main exposure route to Pollard. is actually stacking him with Dak in hopes for the receiving touchdowns again. But I have a hard time ranking Pollard in the same tier as Barkley.
Where is Zeke compared to Jamal Williams for you?
Not as high, because with Williams he should still see the. I guess we'll see about a similar snap rate, maybe like 40%.
But they're in the same tier, right?
Yeah,
I think so. I
and
think
and no one's going to want to play Zeke, and people will
like
want to play Jamal Williams.
if you look at just week 11 when Zeke sat for the entire like second half almost because they were up by 90, he had 15 carries and 1 target. In the games Jamal Williams had played since Swift came back, 16.8 carries per game and 0.8 targets. It's kind of the same role.
Yeah.
And like Jamal doesn't have a lot of yardage upside, neither does Zeke. They both had, I mean, Zeke had a 36% red zone share in week 11. And I'm guessing Jamal Williams' roster rate will be triple Zeke's almost, probably somewhere in there.
Especially with sentiment currently,
Yeah.
with Williams coming off a multi-touchdown game.
Exactly. Everyone want to use Pollard.
Nobody likes Zeke anymore.
Right. If I'm going to use a dusty rush-only running back, I might be more inclined to use Zeke. So I wouldn't be shocked if I wind up being even on them, but as a result, relative to the field, I'll wind up being higher on Zeke than Jamal. So I think that's where I'll be.
Yeah, I'll say this much. You laid out the workloads. If you just take a step back from like who the names are and you look at the workloads and say, okay, one guy's on a team with an implied team total of 26.5, the other's on a team with an implied team total of 22. The guy with the higher implied team total is an 8.5 point favorite at home versus not the best defense. And then you have the other guy, 9.5 point underdog. Like Zeke probably makes more sense to play.
Yeah, which is weird. I like both of them a lot less than Singletary, a lot less than Ramondre. So they're more rotational plays, but I think I'd rather get to Zeke than Jamal, all things considered, especially compared to sentiment. Neither guy in a cash game, though. I want to make that very clear. Let's talk about the Giants side here. Danny Dimes, if we thinking 20% because of the rushing for him, what do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I basically simplified it and said 40% Allen, 40% Dak, and the other 20% would go to Daniel Jones because of the rushing ability. He has 3 games against top 12 pass defenses. Not the best passing numbers, but still rushes pretty well. 38 yards in those games on 6 carries. I don't know how he's not the third QB play. The other guys are just pocket passers with no rushing ability, and some of them not even great matchups. So I think that Jones is going to be the other 20%.
Yep. I will be there as well on him. Saquon Barkley comes in $8,800. And his most relevant sample is the entire season. But in that time, 29.5 just opportunities per game, 116.3 yards from scrimmage per game, 38% red zone share. Those are all very good numbers. I think the issue I'll run into is what you were saying with Jamal Williams, where the game environment is not ideal. Pretty big underdogs, facing a really tough defense that should play well. Saquon's salary is very high. So if I had to choose for one lineup between getting up to Saquon and probably sacrificing Amon-Ra St. Brown realistically at wide receiver, I'd rather get to St. Brown and settle for Dalvin Cook or Ramondre Stevenson, Devin Singletary, than force in Saquon. That could be a mistake. But for one lineup, I think I'm viewing Saquon very similar to Josh Allen, where I want to get there, but realistically, if I have to lop them off to make that sacrifice to get better options elsewhere, I'm okay with that. So I want to get to 30, 40% somewhere if I can, but he will not be my highest exposure player at this position. What about you? What's your in Saquon?
Yeah, just a difficult spot. I started running like game environment scores. This is just barely better than what Detroit's getting. So, and it's just sort of an outlier. Like the one great matchup belongs to Devin Singletary among running backs. So,
yeah, matchup from a like environment perspective. Matchup itself, like the like the rush defense matchup is pretty good for Saquon. The
Sure.
Cowboys 21st against the rush and early downs. And Dalvin ran really well against them. But the problem is you can't run if you're getting dusted. And that's well within the range of outcomes.
Yeah.
So the matchup itself, I don't mind. It's more so like what you were saying. The environment itself is really difficult.
Yeah. So I think I'm with you. I want to get, I need to have at least one share, and that's probably a bad thing to say, but like,
yeah,
I in case Saquon does a Saquon thing, puts up 150,
which he very much can do.
Yeah. Because I mean, he's very good. We've
Yeah.
seen Christian
Awesome.
McCaffrey time and time again put up big games in spots where he shouldn't. Has no business being good. So
one lineup, are you more likely? I'm not using either. I'm thinking one lineup, but are you more likely to get to Allen or Saquon?
Allen, due to
so
the predictability that he could put up a huge game and the much, much better environment for him to do that.
I agree. Let's talk about the wide receivers here for the Giants. No Wan'Dale Robinson in this one. Not sure for Richie James. I was kind of surprised he didn't practice on Monday. In the 2 games they played with no Wan'Dale and without Tony or Sterling Shepard, Darius Slayton 23% target share, Richie James 13%. They had Daniel Bellinger at that time, and I think Marcus Johnson was still running routes. His role's been cut back. Isaiah Hodgins has been kind of the guy who stepped in place of others and beginning more work. I think Hodgins is honestly, I think he's like a half step below Khalif Raymond and Noah Brown. Like he's okay, but Darius Slayton gets a lot of deep work. He's been good on that deep work. He does have a massive 50% target share in that 2-game sample, but that's on 2 deep throws. Saquon Barkley also has a 50% deep share in that time. So, that's shows you what that's worth. But I think that Slayton totally fine to 64. I am probably gonna have to actively try to reduce my exposure to him just because he's in a range I want to be in.
Yeah.
I do want to actively reduce my exposure to him because there are a lot of paths to failure. He does fit very well, and that's kind of the issue. What's your read on Slayton and then on Isaiah Hodgins?
Slayton, I like. I think I'm with you where I need to make sure I don't have too much. 48% air yard share in those 2 games you referenced. 3.10 yards per route run, which is a really good rate.
What's he have for the full season?
In yards per route run?
Yeah.
1 sec. Slayton. I have him at 2.46.
Sweet.
So you like that.
Football player.
He's good. What downfield work there will be, and thankfully all these games are enough wind concerns in these games, which is sick.
Bless him.
But yeah, Slayton in a single lineup, he's going to be in it. There's really no way around that.
Yeah.
Hodgins, I think I'd have him a full tier below Raymond and Brown. I don't love this game that much.
Yeah.
To sort of bump him up to that extent. Plus, again, I like Daniel Jones. I like him primarily due to the rushing. I don't really anticipate like a 350-yard game from him passing. He has not really taken advantage of any situations with elite passing work relative to expectations. So I'm going to have him a bit lower. I wouldn't write him off in the lineups where I stack Jones, but I think Hodgins would be game stacks only, like with Jones.
Yeah. You're probably right. Because I'll have a lot of lineups where I don't punt at all. And that means in the 30 to 40% of lineups where I do punt, I'll probably want to focus more so on Brown, focus on Khalif Raymond, maybe DeAndre Swift, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Again, calling him a punt is so offensive and upsetting, but here's we are. The tight ends for the Giants. We talked about Lawrence Cager on Monday. He's a receiver on FanDuel. He's on the practice squad. He's been called up 3 consecutive games, which means they have to sign him to the active roster to make him active for this game. But they just signed Nick Van Nett off the Saints practice squad. And I think that means he has to be on their active roster for 3 or 4 games now. Well, on the 53 man, not the active roster. So I'm not sure if Cager will get promoted to the active roster. I don't know what their tight end situation is, so I'm just going to avoid it. Any other thoughts for you on the Giants or on this game in the whole?
No, I think we covered.
Dalton Schultz. I think Dalton Schultz is the best tight end play in the slate, above PJ Hawkinson.
I would agree.
Okay. All right, let's move on then to the night game. That is the Patriots at the Vikings. Right now, spread in this game is the Vikings by 2.5. Total is 42.5 for this game. The reason the spread is tight is because Vikings left tackle Christian Darrisaw expected to sit in this one due to a concussion. He had a concussion in week 10, came back week 11, got another concussion, so no chance he plays in this one. Patriots center David Andrews also going to sit because of a thigh injury. So both offenses banged up, but I think the two running backs here are still pretty viable. I think the offensive line injuries and the defenses make it where I'm not going to touch either quarterback, not even going to consider them personally. What's the read on this game overall?
I like Ramondre and Dalvin Cook a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Like the Patriots have such a good defense that I don't envision any way that Kirk Cousins
Correct
bounces back and puts up 25 or 30.
Correct.
I love Justin Jefferson since getting Hawkinson, still a 29% target share, 46% air yard share,
and they're throwing D more often too, which aids that
and
makes that air yard share more important.
The one thing that I have as a note regarding that is that the Patriots are 31st in 8 out allowed, and they haven't been efficient at defending those downfield passes. So there is a path for Jefferson to, ruin all the lineups you think are doing great before that game. He can ruin it, but I would imagine that the Patriots find ways to limit him because there's not a whole lot else to worry about.
Yeah.
Dalvin's good, Hawkinson's good, but if you're trying to key in on someone, it's going to be Jefferson. So
he's playing through turf toe right now. He played through it last week. He practiced, I believe, in full on Monday as well. Does that impact your view of him at all, knowing that he's not at full health at the moment?
It lowers the fear of the big game. So
you have to pick between Saquon and Jefferson. Who do you pick?
Saquon.
I think I do too, but it's tough.
I guess maybe as a flex Saquon, if not for a flex, probably Jefferson just for opportunity cost.
Okay, that's fair. He also fills a receiver slot, which is good because I think that the lower salary.
Yeah, that's what I meant by opportunity cost.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think that the Patriots 8-out's been high all year. That's something I've been thinking about a lot. They've gotten bailed out by some wind at times, which has helped to kind of mask that a bit. Playing indoors here, if it weren't for Darrisaw being banged up, I might be higher on Jefferson, but that doesn't help at all. The reason I like Dalv, the Patriots are gettable on the ground. That hasn't always shown up because they've played a lot of teams that are bad on the ground, like the Jets without Breece Hall cannot run the football at all. Dalv has played 5 games with his snaps being back up, 15 carries per game, 3.8 targets per game. Those numbers are a bit muted because he left the game early in week 11 because everyone did because it was over. But his role has been pretty good, and his production, he's looked good as well. So Dalv, I think that my baseline lineup is going to be Singletary, Ramondre, and Dalv, all 3 of those guys, because I think are all undersalaried, honestly, and get me good bankable production with a very obvious path to upside. So that's why I like Dalv. What about him? And then you can start on Stevenson if you want to.
Yeah, just for Dalv, one of the best roles for really any running back, and he's a good football player. About 73% of the snaps on the year. The red zone role could be a bit better, but you can live with the imperfections because you only have so many guys to pick from for this week. But yeah, I think that Dalv at salary probably 3rd for me behind Singletary and Ramondre.
I think so too.
But I agree with you. Every time I start to build, okay, what's my main lineup going to be? I'm having a hard time going away from those guys.
Yeah.
So I'm there with Dalv, and the reason that I like Ramondre is since Ramondre took over, but in games with Damian Harris actually playing, Ramondre still has a 70% snap rate, 63% route rate,
and a lot of targets on those routes.
I'm at 7.3 targets per game in that span. 47% red zone opportunity share. So not just rushes, but the targets as well. So this team doesn't really have anyone else to go to. Jacoby Myers is like a solid target share in games with Mac Jones back. He's at 27%, but Ramondre's at 24%.
Yeah.
So we love Singletary. I think that if I could really only pick one between Singletary and Ramondre, I'd probably go Ramondre, just due to the actual opportunity being better.
Yeah.
The hard part is the offensive expectations are quite different.
I think that's why I'd go Devin Singletary over Ramondre, but I think they're very much in the same tier and probably my two highest exposure players on the slate. You mentioned Ramondre's target share. The sample I have is their 5 games with Tyquan Thornton and Devontae Parker being active. Jacoby Myers leads with a 23% target share, 33% deep, and 24% in the red zone. But Stevenson's at 21% overall and 24% inside the red zone. Stupid role in a good way. Like that's absurd for a running back. So the Vikings rush defense has been very good overall so far this year. I don't care though, because I'm not using him for his running abilities. I think the Vikings rushing skills more so impact Damian Harris. Harris didn't play. He's $64, and the odds he outscores DeAndre Swift are pretty high. Like his past 5 healthy games, 57 yards in scrimmage per game. Swift is at 32% or 32 yards per game since he came back. Harris is a higher red zone share than Swift in each guy's most relevant sample. So I'd rather go Harris than Swift, honestly, because I think the odds that he gets me 2 touchdowns are higher. Like if I assume the Patriots win, which they can with no Darisaw, Harris is like decently likely to be involved. So
yeah,
there's
also there's an inherent cap on what DeAndre Swift can do.
Yeah, because they won't let him play.
Like
it is hard to score points from the sidelines, which is true for Harris too. His snapper was like 25% last week. So,
but like even like God forbid Jamal Williams gets hurt,
right?
Like, they're not gonna give.
They're gonna give Justin Jackson the ball, man.
So yeah, boy, that hurts. Because Swift's probably my favorite running back relative to like consensus every week. Harris is one of the guys that like less than consensus whenever he's relevant. So that hurts, but I think it's a good point. Yeah. Any like Jonnu Smith or like any dart throws?
I don't think I can use any Patriots outside of Myers and Stevenson and maybe Harris because they rotate everyone. Like Devontae Parker came back last week and played a 40% snap rate.
That's why I didn't even
bother. Parker's like the most viable guy there, but he doesn't like they're just rotating. Like,
ugh. Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, the salaries are low for a reason, but look, you got to embrace risk on a 3-game slate. I don't know if that's the right kind of risk to embrace.
Yeah,
especially with guys with much stickier route rates. One name here on I'm going to call them low salaried guys. Who I consider
Dumpster
Osborne.
Dives.
What's that?
Dumpster dives?
No.
It's like diners, drive-ins, and dives.
No. KJ Osborne, about 87% route rate since the Hawkinson trade, a 14% target share. We know he can get downfield work, and if we're playing like the angle of,
he had 4 downfield targets in the Buffalo game.
Yeah, so I think that he might honestly be. He's in the same tier as Raymond and Noah Brown for me.
Yeah.
He might be. Well, I don't know if I like the game enough to put him number 1 there, but
I think they're all the same.
Yeah.
I might just go even like on all of them. Like try to. Because
Taylor to like who else is in your lineup for those guys?
Yeah. Well, that would mean I'd have no Osborne because I'm not gonna build around this game. But
I'm saying like if you already have
if I have like a Monra already.
Don't play Noah Brown.
I got you. That's fair. Yeah, I think that Osborne's right in their tier. I agree with you where very, very similar. If I had a rank, So one thing to consider with Khalif Raymond is that DJ Chark came back last week and didn't have a full role. Does he ramp up this week? Maybe. Would it be at the expense of Khalif Raymond, or would it be at the expense of Tom Kennedy, who ran 10 routes this past week? I don't know. So maybe I should go Osborne 1. Brown 2, Raymond 3. I don't know. I think they're all the same, honestly.
Yeah. It's again, I
Such a
think
cop-out.
it depends, but it depends. Like, because there's a real chance I play Dak, Schultz, and like either CeeDee Lamb or
Yeah.
Pollard or something.
Yeah.
You can be a little bit weird with your stacks. I'm gonna have much more of like the double stack. 2 pass catchers with my quarterback to normal. I'm not going 3, so like that kind of stuff all matters.
Yeah, I think that's correct. Okay, I'm trying to think if there's anything else to note on this game.
Hawkinson, Thielen.
Yeah, so Hawkinson, looking at the games they played with Hawkinson, he has a 24% target share, 16% deep, which is actually a decent number of like raw deep targets in those games, 33% inside the red zone. Thielen, 15% with 20% deep, which is weird, 11% in the red zone. He's still getting some work in like or downfield. He's $5,900. He was initially on my scrubs to consider list, but then I realized that he was actually higher salary than Gallup, so I kind of had to cross him off there. He's probably the same as Gallup, realistically, though.
Yeah.
So I should probably be higher on him than I am.
Yeah. I think, though, at the savings, I might just take KG Osborne.
Over Thielen? Potentially.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I'd rather just kind of get the better. I mean, Thielen's got good juice. It's better juice on those targets than it seems, but
he doesn't have juice. The targets have juice. We should clarify. Yeah, that's not. He used to have juice. He doesn't. He's old. Yeah, I think that Hawkinson, to me, I'd rather say the $500 on Schultz, but if I need to get off Schultz eventually. Yeah. And I'd rather get up to Hawkinson than go down to Knox, all things considered, personally.
The hard part is I won't play either of these quarterbacks.
True.
So it just lessens the chance that I will be on Hawkinson. I'll be there more whenever I like play Dak with Noah Brown and just, obviously I want to play Schultz with Dak as well, but if I'm going different paths, then I'll be open to Hawkinson a little bit more, but I won't have Kirk Cousins stacks this week.
Yeah, no, I'm not getting there. If Christian Darrisaw makes a miraculous recovery, maybe, but probably not even then. I don't think I'll be getting there at all. Okay, any final thoughts for you on this game specifically?
I think we covered it.
Okay. Any final thoughts for you on the 3-game Thanksgiving slate before we send off the good people to fill out their lineups?
Not that anything can happen, but a lot of stuff can happen, especially in a game like football. If you think that, we're too low on Mac Jones and that like you want to take the savings and build around the other guys.
I forgot to mention the Vikings defense is my favorite defense in this slate because of aforementioned quarterback.
I'm just saying, like,
He should send Zach Wilson a Christmas card, by the way. He got off real clean when he took 18 sacks in that game. I know he had a high completion percentage, but his QBR was like 6 points above Wilson's. He should send Zach Wilson a Christmas card.
Yeah. But again, it's one of those spots, and I don't say that as like, you should always listen to us on main slates, but be a little bit like, you can always think differently.
Don't listen to us ever. It's fine.
I still think that there are 3 quarterbacks in play, and you get a little bit weird with your pass catchers rather than your quarterbacks.
I agree with that. And I'd rather go weird at receiver too than a running back. Yeah, I think that's all we got. So that's all we have for today. We're back once again tomorrow to break down the Week 12 main slate. Get that by watching live over on the FanDuel YouTube page, noon Eastern there on the FanDuel YouTube page, streaming there, and then also up on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed after the fact for that one and all of your other podcast needs. Brandon, if people have questions for you on Twitter, where can they find you there?
I'm on Twitter at Gdula13, GDULA13.
And I am on Twitter at Jim Sannes, JIMSANNES. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast. Big thank you to everyone for tuning in. Have a fantastic and safe Thanksgiving. We'll talk to you once again tomorrow to break down the Week 12 main slate. This has been the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast powered by numberFire.